There's a specific kind of magnetism that has nothing to do with youth, nothing to do with following trends, and absolutely nothing to do with trying to fit into someone else's definition of attractive. It's the kind of presence that walks into a room and changes the energy without saying a word. It's the confidence that comes from decades of experience, the wisdom that can't be faked, and the authenticity that stops people in their tracks. This isn't about playing games or using manipulation tactics. This is about 7 powerful habits that make a mature woman absolutely irresistible. And once you understand them, you'll see why the most captivating women aren't the ones trying the hardest to be noticed. They're the ones who have mastered the art of being genuinely, unapologetically themselves. Welcome back to The Heart Code, where we explore the psychology of attraction, relationships, and personal power. If you're a woman over 40 who's ready to step into your most magnetic self, or if you simply want to understand what makes truly confident women so captivating, you're in exactly the right place. Before we dive deep into these 7 transformative habits, I want to ask you for a small favor. If you find value in this video, please take a moment to hit that like button. It helps more women discover this content and build their confidence. Drop a comment below sharing which of these 7 habits resonates most with you, or tell me about a mature woman in your life who embodies these qualities. Share this video with another woman who needs to hear this message today. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our content about building authentic confidence and creating the relationships you deserve. For those who want to go the extra mile in supporting this channel and helping us create more empowering content for women, consider supporting us with super thanks. Your contribution helps us continue this important work of helping women recognize their inherent worth and power. Now, let's explore these 7 habits that transform a mature woman from simply attractive to absolutely irresistible. Habit number 1. She owns her story without apology. The first habit that makes a mature woman irresistible is perhaps the most powerful and the most misunderstood. It's the ability to own your entire story, every chapter, every mistake, every triumph, every scar, without filtering it through someone else's judgment or diluting it to make others comfortable. This isn't about oversharing or making your past the centerpiece of every conversation. It's about having made peace with who you've been, what you've survived, and how those experiences have shaped the woman you are today. Think about the difference between a woman who apologizes for her past and a woman who acknowledges it as the foundation of her strength. When someone asks about your divorce, your career change at 50, your decision to start over in a new city, or your unconventional life choices, the irresistible woman doesn't shrink. She doesn't launch into defensive explanations or minimize her experiences to make them more palatable. She simply owns them. She might say something like, "Yes, that marriage ended, and it taught me exactly what I will and won't accept in a relationship." Or, "I spent 20 years in a career that wasn't right for me, and now I'm building something that actually matters to me." There's no shame, no excessive explanation, just simple ownership. This habit is irresistible because it signals something profoundly attractive: emotional maturity and self-acceptance. In a world where so many people are still running from their past, still trying to pretend they're someone they're not, still performing for an imaginary audience, a woman who simply is who she is becomes magnetic. She's not trying to convince you of anything. She's not performing innocence or perfection. She's just standing in her truth, and that authentic presence is incredibly powerful. But here's what this habit is not. It's not about being harsh or closed off. It's not about wearing your wounds as armor or using your past pain as a weapon or an excuse. It's not about defining yourself solely by what you've survived or making every conversation about your trauma. The woman who truly owns her story has integrated it. She's processed it, she's learned from it, and now she carries it with the same ease that she carries any other part of her identity. It's simply part of the fabric of who she is, neither hidden nor highlighted, just honestly acknowledged when relevant. The psychology behind why this is so attractive runs deep. Human beings are drawn to authenticity because it feels safe. When someone is comfortable with all parts of themselves, including the parts that society says should be hidden or minimized, it gives others permission to be authentic too. There's no performance to maintain, no facade to uphold, no walking on eggshells, wondering what topics are off limits or what truths might shatter the illusion. A woman who owns her story creates space for real connection because she's offering her real self, not a carefully curated version designed to earn approval. Moreover, owning your story demonstrates a level of self-knowledge and emotional processing that is incredibly rare. Most people spend their entire lives running from uncomfortable truths about themselves. They build elaborate defense mechanisms. They blame others for their circumstances. They minimize their role in their own narrative. They rewrite history to cast themselves as perpetual victims or, conversely, as people to whom nothing bad has ever happened. Both extremes are forms of self-deception, and both create barriers to genuine connection. The mature woman who has done the internal work to own her story has necessarily done deep psychological processing. She's sat with uncomfortable truths. She's acknowledged her mistakes. She's forgiven herself for being human. She's released the need to be perfect in order to be worthy. This internal work shows up in her external presence as a kind of groundedness that people find incredibly compelling. She's not constantly seeking validation because she's already validated herself. She's not defensive because she's got nothing to defend. She's not trying to control how others perceive her because she's secure in how she perceives herself. Let's talk about what building this habit actually looks like in practice. It starts with honest self-reflection and inventory of your life experiences. This doesn't mean dwelling on the past or getting stuck in analysis paralysis. It means taking time to acknowledge the major events, relationships, choices, and turning points that have shaped you. Write them down if that helps. Talk them through with a therapist or trusted friend. The goal is to move from unconscious avoidance to conscious acknowledgement. Next comes the processing phase. This is where you extract meaning and lessons from your experiences. What did that failed business teach you about resilience? What did that toxic relationship show you about your boundaries or lack thereof? What did that period of financial struggle reveal about your resourcefulness? What did that health crisis teach you about what really matters? The irresistible woman doesn't just have experiences, she metabolizes them into wisdom. She actively looks for the growth, the insight, the strength that emerged from difficulty. Then comes perhaps the most challenging part, releasing shame and judgment. This requires examining the internalized voices that tell you your experiences make you damaged, less than, unworthy, or too much. Where did those voices come from? Whose standards are you holding yourself to? What would it mean to decide that your experiences, all of them, are simply part of your unique human journey rather than evidence of your inadequacy? This is deep work, and it often requires professional support, but it's absolutely essential to developing the ability to own your story without apology. Finally, practice sharing appropriately. Owning your story doesn't mean leading every conversation with your trauma or making your past the center of every interaction. It means being comfortable mentioning relevant experiences naturally, without shame or excessive detail. If someone asks if you've ever been married, you can simply say yes and you're divorced now, without launching into a 20-minute explanation or, conversely, changing the subject in obvious discomfort. If your career path comes up, you can mention the transitions you've made without apologizing for not having a linear trajectory. The key is ease and appropriateness, sharing what's relevant to the current conversation without either hiding or oversharing. One of the most beautiful aspects of this habit is how it changes your relationship with judgment, both from yourself and others. When you fully own your story, other people's judgments lose their power. If someone thinks less of you because you've been divorced or changed careers or made unconventional choices, that becomes their limitation, not your problem. You're no longer contorting yourself to fit into narrow definitions of acceptability. You're no longer hiding parts of yourself to avoid disapproval. This freedom is palpable and it's deeply attractive. Consider how this plays out in dating and relationships. A woman who owns her story enters new relationships without hidden landmines. There are no shameful secrets waiting to be discovered, no carefully constructed false narratives that will eventually crumble. She can be honest about her past relationships, her children, her career, her finances, her health, whatever is relevant, without drama or defensiveness. This level of transparency and self-acceptance is incredibly attractive to emotionally healthy partners while simultaneously repelling people looking for someone to manipulate or control. The irresistible woman understands that her story, with all its imperfections and plot twists, is precisely what makes her interesting. She doesn't try to present herself as someone who has never struggled, never failed, never made mistakes. She knows that perfection is not only impossible, but also boring. The texture of a life fully lived, with its ups and downs, its lessons learned and wisdom earned, is far more compelling than a sanitized Instagram perfect version that bears no resemblance to actual human experience. This habit also profoundly affects how you carry yourself in the world. There's a particular kind of posture, both physical and psychological, that comes from not having to hide. Your shoulders are literally and figuratively lighter. You make eye contact more easily. You take up space without apology. You speak with clarity and conviction. You're comfortable with silence because you're not frantically filling it with explanations or justifications. All of these subtle cues communicate confidence and self-assurance, and they make you magnetic. Let me be clear about something important. Owning your story is not the same as being defined by it. Some women make the mistake of becoming so identified with their trauma, their divorce, their illness, or their struggles that they can't move beyond those identities. That's not ownership, that's imprisonment. True ownership means acknowledging your experiences as part of your journey while continuing to write new chapters. It means learning from the past without living in it. It means honoring what you've survived without making it your entire personality. The woman who has mastered this first habit becomes someone others want to be around. She's not exhausting. She's not constantly processing her trauma in public. She's not fishing for sympathy or validation. She's not bitter or hardened by her experiences. Instead, she's integrated them into a rich, complex, authentic self. She can laugh about her mistakes. She can share wisdom from her failures. She can acknowledge pain without drowning in it. She's proof that you can survive hard things and come out not just intact but enhanced. And that living example is profoundly inspiring to others. Building this habit requires courage, especially if you've spent years hiding parts of yourself or crafting a more acceptable narrative. It requires challenging internalized shame and social conditioning about what makes a woman valuable or worthy. It requires developing a strong enough sense of self that external judgment can't shake your foundation. But the payoff is immense. The freedom, the authenticity, the magnetism that comes from fully owning your story is worth every uncomfortable moment of the journey to get there. As you work on developing this habit, pay attention to the areas where you still feel shame or discomfort. Those are your growth edges. What parts of your story do you still minimize or hide? What experiences do you still feel you need to justify or explain? What truths about yourself do you avoid acknowledging? These questions can guide your self-development work and help you move toward fuller self-acceptance and authentic self-expression. Remember, the goal isn't to become invulnerable or to stop caring what anyone thinks. The goal is to develop such a solid relationship with your own truth that external judgments become less relevant. You'll still care about the opinions of people you respect and love, but you won't be controlled by the need for universal approval. You won't sacrifice your authenticity to make others comfortable. You won't shrink yourself to fit into someone else's narrow vision of who you should be. The irresistible mature woman who owns her story without apology has learned one of life's most valuable lessons. Your worth is inherent, not earned, and your experiences, all of them, contribute to the unique person you are rather than detract from your value. This deep knowing radiates from her in every interaction, and it's absolutely magnetic. Habit number 2. She practices radical self-prioritization. The second habit that makes a mature woman irresistible is one that many women struggle with their entire lives, but that becomes non-negotiable as you step into your power. It's the practice of radical self-prioritization. Not selfishness, not narcissism, not disregard for others, but a fundamental commitment to treating your own needs, desires, health, and well-being as legitimate and important. This is the habit that separates women who are perpetually exhausted and resentful from women who seem to have an endless well of energy and generosity. Let's start by addressing the massive cultural programming that makes this habit so challenging for women to develop. From childhood, most women are conditioned to be caretakers, pleasers, and selfless givers. We're taught that our value lies in how much we sacrifice for others. We're praised for putting everyone else first. We're socialized to feel guilty for having needs, selfish for setting boundaries, and difficult for saying no. This conditioning runs deep, and it creates generations of women who are physically present but emotionally depleted, who give and give and give until there's nothing left, who build entire identities around being needed while neglecting their own fundamental requirements for health and happiness. The irresistible mature woman has recognized this programming for what it is, a system that exploits women's emotional labor while offering very little in return. She's done the hard work of unlearning the belief that her needs matter less than everyone else's. She's challenged the notion that self-care is selfish. She's rejected the glorification of martyrdom that tells women they're only valuable when they're sacrificing themselves. And in doing so, she's discovered something revolutionary. When you take care of yourself first, you actually have more to give others. And what you give comes from a place of genuine abundance rather than resentful obligation. So what does radical self-prioritization actually look like? It starts with the basics that many women neglect: proper sleep, nutritious food, regular movement, medical care, and time for rest and recovery. The woman who practices this habit doesn't skip meals because everyone else needs to be fed first. She doesn't sacrifice sleep to finish one more task. She doesn't postpone her doctor's appointments indefinitely. She doesn't push through pain or exhaustion until her body forces her to stop. She treats her physical needs as non-negotiable because she understands that she can't pour from an empty cup. But it goes much deeper than physical self-care. Radical self-prioritization means protecting your emotional and mental well-being with the same vigilance. It means ending conversations that feel toxic. It means distancing yourself from people who drain you. It means saying no to commitments that don't align with your values or energy. It means choosing not to attend events that feel obligatory rather than enjoyable. It means giving yourself permission to change your mind, to disappoint others, to be unavailable, to have limits. This habit is irresistible because it demonstrates self-respect. and self-respect is fundamentally attractive. When a woman shows through her actions that she values herself, that she believes her needs are legitimate, that she won't sacrifice her well-being for approval or to avoid conflict, she commands respect from others. People recognize, consciously or unconsciously, that she has standards for how she treats herself and how she allows others to treat her, and this creates a powerful energetic boundary. Moreover, women who practice radical self-prioritization tend to be more pleasant to be around. This might seem counterintuitive if you believe that prioritizing yourself makes you selfish or difficult, but it's absolutely true. Think about it. A woman who is well-rested, well-fed, emotionally regulated, and operating within her capacity is naturally more patient, generous, creative, and engaged. She's not running on fumes and snapping at everyone. She's not resentful about all the things she's doing that she doesn't want to do. She's not quietly keeping score of everything she sacrifices. She's genuinely available for connection because she's not depleted. The psychology behind this is clear. Burnout and resentment are relationship killers. When you consistently neglect your own needs to meet everyone else's, you build up resentment that eventually seeps out in passive-aggressive behavior, emotional withdrawal, or outbursts. You might not consciously realize you're angry about always putting yourself last, but it affects everything. Your tone becomes sharp. Your patience runs thin. You stop being able to enjoy the very relationships you're sacrificing yourself for. You become a martyr, and martyrs, despite the cultural glorification, are actually quite unpleasant to live with. In contrast, the woman who takes care of herself first shows up to her relationships and responsibilities as her best self. She has energy for the people and projects she cares about because she hasn't depleted herself on obligations she resents. She can give generously because she's giving from overflow, not from scarcity. Her yes means yes, and her no means no, so people trust her communication. She doesn't build up toxic resentment and then explode. She addresses issues as they arise because she's paying attention to her internal signals rather than suppressing them. Let's talk about boundaries because they're the operational system of radical self-prioritization. Boundaries are simply the limits you set to protect your physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being. They're not walls designed to keep everyone out. They're parameters that define what you will and won't accept, what you will and won't do, what you need to feel safe and respected. The mature woman who has developed this habit has clear boundaries, communicates them directly, and enforces them consistently. This might look like telling your adult children that you're not available for daily crisis management anymore. It might mean informing your partner that you need 2 evenings a week for your own interests. It might involve telling your boss that you don't check email after work hours. It might mean declining to host every holiday. It might involve ending friendships that feel one-sided. Whatever the specific boundaries, what matters is that they reflect your actual needs and limits, not what you think you should be able to tolerate. One of the most powerful aspects of this habit is how it changes the quality of your relationships. When you practice radical self-prioritization, you naturally filter out people who are only interested in what they could take from you. The takers, the users, the energy vampires, they fall away because you're no longer an easy target. You're no longer endlessly available. You're no longer willing to be depleted for their benefit. This can feel scary at first, especially if you've built your identity around being needed, but it's actually incredibly freeing. What remains after this natural filtering are relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care. The people who stay are those who value you as a whole person, not just as a resource. They're people who appreciate your boundaries because they have their own. They're people who support your self-care because they understand that healthy individuals create healthy relationships. These are the connections worth nurturing, and when you're not exhausted from managing taker relationships, you have so much more energy for these authentic bonds. The irresistible woman also practices self-prioritization in how she spends her time and energy. She's not trying to be everything to everyone. She's not accepting every invitation, joining every committee, or volunteering for every project. She's strategic and selective about where she invests herself. She asks, does this align with my values? Does this energize or deplete me? Is this something I genuinely want to do or something I think I should do? Will I resent this commitment? These questions help her make choices that support her well-being rather than drain it. This selectivity extends to her goals and aspirations. The mature woman who practices this habit has learned to distinguish between what she genuinely wants and what she thinks she's supposed to want based on social conditioning, family expectations, or comparison with others. She's given herself permission to want what she wants, even if it's unconventional. She's stopped pursuing goals that don't actually matter to her just because they'd look impressive. She's focused her energy on what genuinely lights her up, and this focus makes her more successful and fulfilled in her chosen areas. Let's address the guilt that often accompanies this habit, especially for women. You've been socialized to feel guilty for prioritizing yourself. You might hear voices, internal or external, telling you you're being selfish, neglecting your responsibilities, or not being a good mother, daughter, partner, or friend. This guilt is often the biggest obstacle to developing this habit, and it requires direct confrontation. The truth is, you are not responsible for everyone else's happiness, comfort, or success. You are not obligated to sacrifice yourself to meet everyone else's needs. You are not selfish for having limits, for needing rest, for wanting time alone, for saying no, for disappointing others. These beliefs might be deeply ingrained, but they're not true, and they don't serve you. The irresistible woman has done the work to separate legitimate responsibility from manufactured guilt, and she refuses to let guilt manipulate her into self-neglect. She's also learned to distinguish between self-prioritization and selfishness. Selfishness is demanding that everyone else sacrifice for you while you do nothing for them. Selfishness is taking without giving, using people as resources, and having no regard for how your actions affect others. Self-prioritization is simply treating yourself with the same consideration you extend to others. It's maintaining your health and well-being so you can be present and effective in your life. It's setting reasonable limits so you don't burn out. These are not the same thing, and conflating them is a manipulation tactic designed to keep you in a pattern of self-sacrifice. Building this habit requires developing a strong internal compass. You need to become attuned to your body's signals about what you need. You need to recognize when you're operating from genuine desire versus obligation. You need to notice when resentment is building. You need to identify your limits before you reach them. This requires regular check-ins with yourself, asking, how am I feeling physically? What's my energy level? What do I need right now? What am I avoiding? What am I resentful about? These questions help you stay connected to your internal experience rather than just reactively responding to external demands. The practice also requires developing the skill of saying no clearly and without excessive explanation. This is challenging for many women who've been socialized to be agreeable and accommodating, but it's essential. The irresistible woman doesn't say, "I'm so sorry, I really wish I could, but I just don't think I'll be able to because I have this thing, and also my schedule is really crazy right now, but maybe another time I feel so bad about this." She says, "No, that doesn't work for me," or "No, I'm not available for that." Simple, clear, no apology, no justification. Her no is complete. She's also comfortable with the discomfort of others' disappointment. This might be the hardest part. When you start prioritizing yourself, especially if people are used to you always saying yes, they will be disappointed. They might express that disappointment. They might try to guilt you. They might withdraw or get angry. Your job is not to manage their feelings or to sacrifice yourself to prevent their discomfort. Your job is to maintain your boundaries with compassion but firmness. I understand you're disappointed, and I'm still not available. This is the practice of allowing others to have their feelings without making those feelings your responsibility to fix. Radical self-prioritization also means investing in yourself financially, educationally, and developmentally. The woman who practices this habit doesn't wait until everyone else's needs are met before spending money on herself. She budgets for her own education, hobbies, healthcare, and pleasure. She doesn't feel guilty about buying herself things that enhance her life. She doesn't minimize her own desires as frivolous while everyone else's wants are legitimate. She understands that investing in her own growth, skills, health, and happiness is not only acceptable, but wise. This habit transforms how you show up in every area of life. At work, you're more productive because you're operating within your capacity rather than constantly overwhelmed. In relationships, you're more authentic because you're not suppressing your needs and building resentment. In parenting, you're modeling healthy self-care and boundaries for your children. In friendship, you're available for genuine connection because you're not depleted. The ripple effects are profound. The irresistible quality of this habit comes from the self-respect and centeredness it creates. There's something deeply attractive about a woman who knows her worth, respects her needs, and doesn't negotiate on her well-being. She's not desperate for approval because she approves of herself. She's not trying to earn love through self-sacrifice because she knows her inherent worthiness. She's not afraid of setting boundaries because she values peace more than she fears conflict. This groundedness is magnetic. As you develop this habit, you'll likely face resistance, both internal and external. You'll encounter your own conditioning, telling you to put yourself last. You'll face people who benefited from your self-neglect and who want you to go back to that pattern. You'll have moments of doubt where you wonder if you're being too much, too demanding, too selfish. In those moments, come back to this truth. You have one life, one body, one reservoir of energy and time. How you choose to spend those precious resources matters. Spending them all on everyone else while neglecting yourself is not noble. It's unsustainable. Prioritizing your own well-being is not selfish. It's essential. The mature woman who practices radical self-prioritization becomes a model for others, especially younger women who are still trapped in the people-pleasing, self-sacrificing pattern. She shows them that it's possible to be caring and generous while also having firm boundaries. She demonstrates that you can love deeply without losing yourself. She proves that self-respect and healthy relationships are not mutually exclusive, but actually mutually reinforcing. This modeling is part of what makes her so attractive. She's living proof that there's another way. Habit number 3. She cultivates genuine curiosity about life and others. The third habit that makes a mature woman irresistible is one that keeps her perpetually engaged with life and deeply connected to the people around her. It's the cultivation of genuine curiosity about life, about ideas, about the world, and especially about other people. This isn't the performance of interest or the polite questions you ask because social convention requires it. This is authentic curiosity, the kind that makes you lean in during conversations, that keeps you reading and learning, that makes you notice details others miss, that turns everyday interactions into opportunities for discovery. Many people become less curious as they age. They settle into fixed patterns of thinking. They stop questioning their assumptions. They lose their sense of wonder about the world. They approach conversations as opportunities to broadcast their own views rather than to learn something new. They become rigid in their opinions, closed to new experiences and intellectually stagnant. This closedness shows up as a kind of energetic heaviness, a sense that they've already decided everything important and have nothing left to discover. The irresistible mature woman has gone in the opposite direction. She's maintained, or perhaps rediscovered, a childlike capacity for wonder and inquiry. She's interested in understanding how things work, why people think the way they do, what motivates human behavior, how systems function, what creates beauty, where ideas come from. She reads widely, she asks questions, she listens more than she speaks. She approaches each day as an opportunity to learn something new, encounter something beautiful, or understand something more deeply. This habit is irresistible for multiple reasons. First, curious people are simply more interesting to be around. When someone is genuinely interested in the world, they have stories to share, insights to offer, and questions to ask. Conversations with them are engaging rather than draining. They bring fresh perspectives and make unexpected connections. They notice things that others overlook. They elevate mundane interactions through their attentiveness and engagement. Being around a genuinely curious person makes you see the world differently, and that's a gift people unconsciously recognize and value. Second, and perhaps more importantly, genuine curiosity about others is one of the most powerful relationship-building tools that exists. When you ask real questions and actually listen to the answers, when you remember details people have shared and follow up on them, when you care about understanding someone's perspective even if it differs from yours, you make people feel seen, heard, and valued. This is increasingly rare in a world where most people are waiting for their turn to talk rather than actually listening. The woman who offers this quality of attention stands out dramatically. Think about the difference in these interactions. Someone asks you, "How are you?" You sense they're asking out of politeness, and they're already formulating what they're going to say next. You give the standard "fine, thanks," and move on. Nothing is exchanged. Compare that to someone who asks, "How have you been?" and then actually waits for your answer, maintains eye contact, asks follow-up questions, and engages with what you're sharing. You can feel the difference immediately. The first person is performing social nicety. The second person is genuinely interested in you. The mature woman who has developed this habit is the second person. She asks meaningful questions and she listens to understand, not to respond. She remembers that you mentioned your daughter's college applications and asks about them months later. She notices when your energy seems different and gently inquires if everything's okay. She doesn't fill every silence with talking. She creates space for others to share. She doesn't interrupt or redirect conversations back to herself. She makes people feel like they matter, because in the moment of that interaction, they genuinely do matter to her. The psychological mechanism here is powerful. Human beings have a fundamental need to be seen and understood. We want to know that our thoughts, feelings, and experiences matter to someone. When you offer genuine curiosity and attention to another person, you're meeting that deep psychological need. You're validating their existence and importance. This creates profound bonds and makes you someone people want to be around because being around you makes them feel good about themselves. But here's what's crucial to understand. This cannot be faked. People can sense the difference between performed interest and genuine curiosity. If you're asking questions as a manipulation tactic or because you read somewhere that asking questions makes you likable, people will feel that inauthenticity. The irresistible woman's curiosity comes from a genuine place. She asks because she actually wants to know. She listens because she's actually interested. She remembers because the person and their story actually matter to her. So how does one cultivate genuine curiosity if it doesn't come naturally? It starts with challenging cynicism and know-it-all attitudes. Many people stop being curious because they think they already know everything important. They've decided what's true, what matters, how the world works, and they're not open to information that challenges those conclusions. This closed-mindedness is the enemy of curiosity. To cultivate curiosity, you have to be willing to admit what you don't know, to be wrong, to have your views challenged and changed. The practice involves consciously approaching situations with beginner's mind, a Zen concept that means seeing things as if for the first time, without the overlay of all your assumptions and preconceptions. Even in familiar situations with familiar people, can you look with fresh eyes? Can you ask a question you've never asked before? Can you listen for something you haven't heard previously? This kind of attention requires presence and intentionality, but it transforms both your experience and others' experience of you. Curiosity about life means being a perpetual student. The irresistible mature woman doesn't think she's learned everything she needs to know. She takes classes, reads books outside her usual genre, travels to new places, tries new activities, exposes herself to different perspectives. She might learn a new language at 60, take up painting at 55, study philosophy at 65. Age doesn't stop her intellectual growth. If anything, retirement or an empty nest creates more space for exploration and learning. This orientation toward learning keeps her mind sharp and her perspective fresh. She has things to talk about because she's engaging with new ideas. She has enthusiasm and energy because she's regularly stimulated and challenged. She doesn't become the person whose conversations always circle back to the same stories from decades ago because she's actively creating new experiences and acquiring new knowledge. This vitality is inherently attractive. The curious woman also tends to be less judgmental, which makes her someone people feel safe opening up to. When you're genuinely curious about why people think and act the way they do, you're less likely to immediately condemn or dismiss them. You want to understand the context, the motivations, the experiences that shaped their perspective. This doesn't mean you have no boundaries or that you accept harmful behavior, but it does mean you approach difference with interest rather than immediate judgment. This creates relationships where people feel they can be honest. They don't have to perform or pretend with you because you're not going to shame them for being human. You're curious about their real experiences, thoughts, and feelings, not the sanitized version they present to the world. This invitation to authenticity is incredibly valuable, and people who feel truly seen by you will naturally be drawn to your presence. Let's talk about curiosity in conversation specifically, because this is where the habit most visibly manifests. The woman who has developed this skill asks open-ended questions rather than yes-no questions. Instead of, "Did you have a good weekend?" she asks, "What did you do this weekend?" Instead of, "Do you like your job?" she asks, "What's the most interesting part of your work right now?" These questions invite real sharing rather than one-word answers. She also asks follow-up questions based on what people share. If you mention that you're renovating your house, she doesn't just say, "Oh, that's nice," and change the subject. She asks, "What are you changing? Are you doing the work yourself? What made you decide to renovate rather than move?" She pursues threads of conversation, showing that she's actually interested in understanding your experience. This makes conversations feel dynamic and engaging, rather than like she's just going through a checklist of polite inquiries. Moreover, she's comfortable with depth. She doesn't keep all conversations at the surface level of weather and weekend plans. When appropriate, she asks deeper questions. What's been on your mind lately? What are you excited about right now? What's challenging you? She's not invasive or pushy, but she creates openings for meaningful exchange if the other person wants to go there. Many people are starving for substantial conversations, and offering that possibility makes you memorable. The irresistible woman also brings curiosity to conflict and disagreement. When someone expresses a view different from hers, her first response isn't defensive argument, it's genuine inquiry. That's interesting. What makes you see it that way? I've thought about this differently. Can you help me understand your perspective? She's secure enough in her own views that she doesn't feel threatened by different ones, and she's curious enough to want to understand how intelligent people can come to different conclusions. This makes her someone you can have real conversations with, even about difficult topics, without it devolving into argument or avoidance. This habit also shows up in how she approaches her own life and experiences. She's reflective and self-aware because she's curious about her own patterns, motivations, and reactions. When she notices herself responding strongly to something, she gets curious about why. What's being triggered? What does this reveal about her values or past experiences? This self-curiosity leads to personal growth and emotional intelligence, both of which enhance her attractiveness. Curiosity about the world keeps her engaged with current events, cultural shifts, technological changes, and social dynamics. She doesn't disengage from the world or dismiss everything new as worse than how things used to be. She wants to understand what's happening and why. This keeps her relevant and relatable across age gaps. She can connect with younger people because she's interested in their world rather than dismissive of it. She can appreciate different cultural expressions because she's curious about them rather than judgmental. One beautiful aspect of this habit is how it combats the isolation that many people experience as they age. When you're genuinely curious about others, you naturally build and maintain connections. You have reasons to reach out to people, questions to ask, shared interests to explore. You don't become the person who is slowly withdrawn from the world because you've decided there's nothing new to discover. You remain engaged, connected, and part of the living flow of human interaction. The practice of curiosity also keeps you humble, and humility is attractive. When you're genuinely curious, you're constantly encountering things you don't know, perspectives you haven't considered, and experiences beyond your own. This natural confrontation with the limits of your knowledge prevents arrogance and keeps you open and teachable. The irresistible woman knows a lot, has accumulated decades of wisdom and experience, but she holds that knowledge lightly. She's always willing to learn more, to be corrected, to discover she was wrong about something. Building this habit in practical terms means consciously choosing curiosity over assumption. When you notice yourself making judgments or jumping to conclusions, pause and ask yourself what you might be missing. What could you ask to understand better? What assumption are you making that might not be true? This simple practice, repeated consistently, rewires your default responses from judgment to inquiry. It means reading widely and exposing yourself to different perspectives intentionally. Don't just read books and articles that confirm what you already believe. Seek out well-argued perspectives different from yours. Read fiction to understand human nature. Read history to understand context. Read science to understand the world. Read philosophy to understand ideas. This broad reading creates a rich internal landscape of knowledge and questions that naturally overflow into engaging conversation and deeper thinking. It means saying yes to new experiences when you can. Try the cuisine you've never had. Visit the place you've never been. Take the class that sounds interesting. Attend the event outside your usual circle. Every new experience is data. Every new person you meet is a potential teacher. Every unfamiliar situation is an opportunity to learn something about yourself or the world. This orientation toward experience keeps life interesting and keeps you interesting. The irresistible mature woman who cultivates genuine curiosity becomes a person of depth and substance. She's not one-dimensional or predictable. She's constantly evolving, learning, questioning, and exploring. Conversations with her are never boring because she's interested in so many things and curious about your interests too. She makes you think about things differently. She introduces you to ideas and perspectives you hadn't considered. She remembers you and what matters to you, which makes you feel valued. This habit is perhaps one of the most sustainable sources of attractiveness because it actually gets better with age. A 25-year-old might be curious, but she hasn't had decades to accumulate knowledge, experiences, and patterns to notice. The mature woman's curiosity is enriched by her life experience. She can connect dots others can't because she's seen more. She can ask better questions because she understands more about human nature and life's complexities. Her curiosity isn't naive, it's sophisticated, and that makes it even more compelling. Habit number 4, she maintains her own passions and pursuits. The fourth habit that makes a mature woman irresistible is perhaps one of the most visible and energetically powerful. It's the maintenance of her own passions, pursuits, interests, and goals, entirely independent of her relationships, family responsibilities, or anyone else's approval. She has things she does just because they light her up, skills she's developing because they fascinate her, projects she's working on because they matter to her. She has her own life, and that independent vitality makes her magnetic. Many women, especially those who came of age when women were primarily defined by their relationships to others as wives, mothers, daughters, or caretakers, lose themselves in the process of caring for everyone else. They sublimate their own interests to support their partner's career, their children's activities, their aging parents' needs. They spend decades building everyone else's dreams while their own passions and talents lie dormant. By the time the kids leave home or the relationship ends or retirement comes, they look around and realize they don't know who they are outside of these roles. They have no hobbies, no interests, no pursuits that are purely theirs. The irresistible mature woman has avoided this trap, or she's consciously worked to escape it. She has reclaimed or maintained her own interests. She paints, writes, gardens, plays music, practices yoga, studies languages, volunteers for causes she cares about, runs a book club, competes in triathlons, restores furniture, whatever it is that makes her feel alive and engaged. These aren't activities she does because she should or because someone else wants her to. They're pursuits that genuinely energize and fulfill her. This habit is irresistible for several interconnected reasons. First, passion is inherently attractive. When someone is genuinely excited about something, their energy changes. They light up. They become animated. Their enthusiasm is contagious. Watching someone talk about something they love, whether it's photography or pottery or political activism or playing the cello, is compelling. You can feel the aliveness in them, and that aliveness draws you in. Second, having your own passions creates a full, rich life that doesn't depend on anyone else for meaning or entertainment. The woman who has her own pursuits isn't sitting around waiting for someone to complete her or fill her time. She has things to do, projects to work on, skills to practice, goals to achieve. This independence is attractive because it signals that a relationship with her would enhance your life rather than consume it. She's not looking for someone to be her entire world. She's looking for someone to share her already full world with. Third, maintaining your own passions prevents the enmeshment and loss of self that kills so many relationships. When you have your own interests, you maintain your own identity. You have things to talk about. You have experiences that don't include your partner. You don't need to do everything together or share every moment. This creates the necessary space and independence that actually keeps relationships healthy and vibrant. Paradoxically, having separate interests often brings couples closer because each person remains interesting and has room to breathe. Let's dig deeper into the psychology here. Human beings are attracted to wholeness, not neediness. When you meet someone who has their own life, their own goals, their own sources of joy and fulfillment, you recognize that they're choosing to be with you rather than needing you to complete them. This choice-based relationship is much more solid and attractive than a need-based one. Need-based relationships are fragile because they're built on dependence rather than genuine desire for each other's company. Moreover, when you have your own passions, you're more interesting. You have stories to tell that don't revolve around shared experiences. You have insights from your pursuits. You have challenges you're working through and victories you're celebrating. You bring fresh energy and perspective into the relationship because you have a life outside of it. This keeps things dynamic rather than stagnant. You're both growing and evolving as individuals, which allows the relationship to grow and evolve too. The woman who maintains her own passions also models something important. She shows that it's possible to be committed to relationships while also being committed to yourself. She demonstrates that you don't have to choose between loving others and pursuing your own interests. She proves that you can be a devoted partner, mother, friend, or daughter, while also being a painter, athlete, scholar, activist, or entrepreneur. This integration of roles rather than sacrificing one for the other is powerful. Think about what happens when someone makes their entire identity about being in a relationship. They have no friends outside the relationship. They have no interests that don't include their partner. They organize their entire schedule around the other person's availability. They've essentially made their partner responsible for their happiness, entertainment, and sense of purpose. This is an enormous burden, and it creates pressure and resentment. It also makes them boring because they have nothing to talk about except the relationship itself. In contrast, the woman with her own passions has rich conversations to offer. She can talk about the book she's reading, the play she saw, the pottery class she's taking, the volunteer work she's doing, the trails she hiked, the recipes she's perfecting. She has experiences that are hers alone, and sharing them creates connection without neediness. She invites her partner into her world rather than demanding they be her entire world. This habit also provides protection and resilience. When your identity and happiness depend entirely on a relationship, you're vulnerable. If the relationship ends, you're left with nothing. But when you have your own passions and pursuits, you have something solid to stand on regardless of your relationship status. You know who you are outside of being someone's partner. You have purpose and direction that aren't contingent on someone else. This resilience is not only healthy, it's attractive because it signals emotional maturity and independence. Let's talk about what this looks like in practice. It means blocking out regular time for your pursuits and treating that time as non-negotiable. If you paint on Saturday mornings, that time is sacred. You don't give it up every time someone asks for something. You don't feel guilty about protecting it. You don't constantly sacrifice it for other obligations. You prioritize it the way you prioritize important commitments because it is important. It's what keeps you connected to yourself. It means investing in your passions financially and developmentally. You take the class, buy the equipment, join the group, hire the teacher. You don't always wait until everything else is taken care of before spending money on your interests. You budget for them. You recognize that developing your talents and pursuing your interests is a legitimate use of resources, not a frivolous luxury to be indulged only when everything else is perfect. It means pursuing goals in your areas of interest. Maybe you're working toward running a marathon, finishing a novel, mastering a piece of music, creating a portfolio of photographs, or building a business. Having Goals related to your passions gives you something to work toward, measure progress against, and eventually accomplish. This creates a sense of agency and achievement that's entirely your own, independent of your roles in relationships. The irresistible woman also shares her passions without apologizing for them or minimizing them. If someone asks what she did this weekend and she spent 6 hours in her studio, she doesn't say, "Oh, nothing much, just messed around with some painting." She says, "I worked on a painting series I'm developing. It's really coming together." She owns her interests and communicates that they matter. This confidence in her pursuits invites others to take them seriously too. But she also doesn't make her passions the only thing she talks about. There's a balance between sharing what matters to you and being so consumed by a single interest that you can't talk about anything else. The mature woman with diverse interests can move fluidly between topics. She can be passionate about her photography while also being interested in current events, your work challenges, the book you're reading, or plans for next weekend. Her passions are an important part of her life, not the only part. This habit becomes especially important as you age and life transitions happen. Children grow up and leave. Careers end with retirement. Relationships sometimes end through death or separation. If you've maintained your own passions throughout these phases, you have continuity. You have things that ground you when everything else is changing. You're not left wondering who you are or what to do with yourself. You already know. You're the person who does this thing that you love, and that identity persists through all the transitions. Many women discover or rediscover their passions later in life, and that's beautiful too. Maybe you painted in college but gave it up for decades while raising kids. Picking it back up in your 50s isn't too late. It's perfect timing. Maybe you always wanted to learn piano but never had time. Starting at 65 isn't ridiculous, it's admirable. The irresistible mature woman doesn't let age or should-haves stop her from pursuing what calls to her now. There's also something powerful about being a beginner at something as a mature woman. It requires humility to not be good at something, to make mistakes, to be in a learning phase. When you're willing to be a beginner, you're modeling that growth doesn't stop at any age, that it's okay to not be an expert at everything, that the joy of learning is worth the discomfort of not being immediately proficient. This kind of courage and openness to growth is very attractive. The woman who maintains her own passions also tends to be more supportive of others' pursuits because she understands their importance. She doesn't feel threatened when her partner wants time for his interests. She encourages her friends in their goals. She celebrates other people's achievements without jealousy. This generosity comes from having her own sources of fulfillment. She doesn't need to be the center of every story or the most accomplished person in every room. Let's address the guilt and resistance that some women feel around maintaining their own passions. You might hear internal voices or external pressure suggesting that focusing on your interests is selfish, especially if you have family responsibilities. You might feel like you should wait until everyone else's needs are met before you pursue what you want. You might minimize your interests as less important than work, family, or household management. All of these are manifestations of the programming that tells women their needs and desires matter less. The truth is that pursuing your passions doesn't make you selfish or neglectful. It makes you whole, it makes you interesting, it makes you happy, and when you're happy and fulfilled, you're better at everything else. You're a better partner because you're not resentful. You're a better parent because you're modeling self-care and pursuing goals. You're a better friend because you have energy to give. Your passions don't detract from your relationships. They enhance them by making you more vital and engaged. Building this habit requires identifying what actually lights you up. which can be challenging if you've spent years suppressing your own desires. What did you love before life got so busy? What do you find yourself curious about? What activities make time disappear because you're so engaged? What do you do that feels like play rather than work? These questions can help you identify your genuine interests versus what you think you should be interested in. It also requires giving yourself permission to pursue these interests imperfectly. You don't have to be amazing at something for it to be worth doing. You don't have to monetize every hobby or turn every interest into a side hustle. You can do things purely for the joy of doing them, for the learning, for the creative expression, for the physical engagement, for the mental stimulation. The goal is your own fulfillment, not external validation or achievement. The irresistible mature woman with her own passions radiates a particular kind of contentment and vitality that draws people in. She's not desperate or clingy because she has her own life. She's not boring because she has multiple interests and pursuits. She's not resentful because she's not sacrificing herself. She's engaged with life, always learning and growing, always working on something that matters to her. This energy is contagious and compelling. She also offers an invitation to others to develop their own passions. Through her example, she shows that it's possible, valuable, and worth the time and effort. She creates permission for others to pursue what lights them up. She celebrates other people's interests and encourages them in their pursuits. This supportive energy, coming from someone who walks the talk, is incredibly powerful and attractive. Ultimately, this habit is about maintaining your own identity and vitality throughout all of life's phases and demands. It's about knowing yourself deeply enough to know what nourishes you and committing to making space for that nourishment. It's about being a whole person with a rich inner life and external pursuits that reflect your values and interests. This wholeness is the foundation of true attractiveness, because you become someone worth knowing, someone with depth and dimension, someone who enhances others' lives through your own aliveness. Habit number 5, she speaks her truth with grace. The fifth habit that makes a mature woman irresistible is the ability to speak her truth with grace. This is the skill of authentic communication, the capacity to say what needs to be said, to express disagreement, to set boundaries, to share feelings, and to confront difficult issues, all while maintaining composure, kindness, and respect. It's the balance between brutal honesty and people-pleasing silence, the middle path of clear, direct, compassionate communication. Many women struggle with this balance. They swing between two extremes. Either they suppress their truth entirely, saying yes when they mean no, agreeing when they disagree, hiding their feelings and avoiding conflict at all costs, or they express their truth in ways that are harsh, aggressive, defensive, or dripping with resentment from years of suppression. Neither extreme serves them or creates healthy relationships. The irresistible mature woman has learned to speak her truth clearly and kindly, without apology, but also without aggression. Let's start with what speaking your truth actually means. It means knowing what you think, feel, want, need, and believe, and being willing to communicate that honestly. It means not hiding behind vague hints or passive-aggressive comments. It means not expecting people to read your mind or pick up on subtle cues. It means direct, clear communication about your internal experience and your boundaries. I need time alone tonight. I disagree with that assessment. That comment hurt my feelings. I'm not comfortable with that arrangement. Simple, honest statements of truth. The grace part is equally important. Grace means delivering your truth in a way that respects both yourself and the other person. It means being honest without being cruel. It means being direct without being aggressive. It means setting boundaries without attacking. It means expressing anger without verbal violence. It means saying no without elaborate justification or apologizing for having limits. Grace is the difference between "you're an idiot and that's a stupid idea" and "I see that differently and here's why." Both are honest, but only one maintains respect and relationship. This habit is irresistible because it creates the conditions for real intimacy and trust. When you speak your truth, people know where they stand with you. There's no guessing, no game playing, no hidden agendas. They trust that if you're unhappy, you'll say so. If you disagree, you'll share your perspective. If there's a problem, you'll address it. This predictability and honesty creates safety in relationships. People can relax around you because they don't have to decode your communication or wonder what you're really thinking. Moreover, the ability to speak difficult truths with grace demonstrates emotional maturity. It shows you can tolerate discomfort, both your own and others. It shows you value honest communication more than false peace. It shows you respect people enough to be truthful with them, rather than managing them with polite lies. It shows you trust the relationship enough to believe it can handle honesty. All of these signals communicate that you're a safe, mature person to be in relationship with. Think about the psychological impact of being around someone who doesn't speak their truth. You're constantly walking on eggshells, trying to read subtle signals, wondering if they're really okay or just saying they are. You're managing their emotions rather than having honest exchanges. You're dealing with passive-aggressive behavior instead of direct requests. You don't trust their yes because you suspect it might really be a resentful, coerced agreement. This creates anxiety and exhaustion in relationships. In contrast, being around someone who speaks their truth with grace is refreshing and relaxing. When she says she's fine, you can believe her. When she says yes, you know she means it. When she has a problem, she tells you directly rather than punishing you with silent treatment or dropped hints. This directness eliminates so much unnecessary stress and drama. It creates efficient, clean communication where issues get resolved rather than festering. The mature woman who has developed this skill understands something crucial. Difficult conversations are uncomfortable in the moment, but avoiding them creates far more pain in the long run. Suppressing your truth might keep the peace temporarily, but it builds resentment, creates distance, and eventually explodes in ways much more damaging than having had the difficult conversation early on. She's willing to have the awkward moment, the uncomfortable exchange, the hard conversation because she knows it's the only path to authentic relationship. Let's talk about what this looks like practically. It starts with knowing your truth, which requires self-awareness. You need to be in touch with your feelings, your needs, your boundaries, your values. This means regular check-ins with yourself asking, how am I really feeling about this? What do I actually want? What's bothering me? What do I need? Many people skip this step and try to communicate before they even know what their truth is, which leads to confused, unclear messages. Once you know your truth, the practice is to communicate it clearly and directly. This often means using I statements that take ownership of your experience. I feel frustrated when plans change at the last minute. I need more advance notice for social commitments. I don't want to lend money in this situation. I'm not interested in discussing that topic. These statements are clear, direct, and owned. They don't blame, attack, or manipulate. They simply state the speaker's truth. The grace component often involves choosing your timing and tone carefully. You can speak truth in a moment of rage, but it likely won't be received well. The irresistible woman has learned to recognize when she's too activated to communicate effectively. She might say, I need to talk about this, but I need to cool down first. Can we revisit this tomorrow? She gives herself time to regulate her emotions so she can communicate clearly rather than just venting reactively. She also considers the other person's capacity to receive what she needs to say. If someone is already stressed or dealing with a crisis, it might not be the right time for a heavy conversation unless it absolutely can't wait. This isn't suppressing truth, it's being strategic about delivery. She might say, "I know you're dealing with a lot right now. I have something I need to discuss with you. When would be a good time this week?" This respects both her need to communicate and the other person's current capacity. The tone she uses is firm but not harsh. She's not apologetic or wishy-washy, but she's also not attacking. Her body language is open, not aggressive. Her voice is calm but serious. She makes eye contact. She doesn't yell, but she also doesn't whisper or hedge. She speaks with conviction and kindness, which is a powerful combination that makes people actually listen rather than getting defensive. One of the most important aspects of this habit is the ability to receive responses to your truth without becoming defensive. When you speak your truth, others might disagree, might be upset, might push back. The mature woman can hold her ground without attacking. She can listen to their perspective without abandoning her own. She can say, "I understand that's how you see it, and my experience is different." She doesn't need everyone to agree with her truth for it to be valid and worthy of expression. She's also learned to distinguish between truth that needs to be spoken and thoughts that are better processed privately. Not every fleeting feeling, critical thought, or passing irritation needs to be verbalized. Part of grace is having a filter, choosing to address patterns rather than every individual instance, focusing on important issues rather than nitpicking. She's honest about things that matter without creating constant friction over minor annoyances. Let's address the fear that often prevents women from speaking their truth. You might worry that honesty will damage relationships, that people will reject you if you're too direct, that conflict will spiral out of control, that you'll hurt someone's feelings. These fears are understandable, but they're often overblown. Healthy relationships can handle honesty. In fact, they require it. People who truly care about you want to know your real thoughts and feelings, even when they're uncomfortable. What damages relationships isn't honesty, it's dishonesty. It's the resentment that builds from years of suppressed truth. It's the distance that grows when you can't be authentic. It's the loss of trust when people discover you've been hiding your real feelings. It's the explosions that happen when suppressed truth finally bursts out in uncontrolled ways. Honest, graceful communication actually strengthens relationships by creating genuine understanding and resolving issues before they become major problems. The irresistible woman has also learned that how people respond to her truth tells her important information about them. If someone reacts to her clear, kind boundary with anger or manipulation, that tells her something about their character and their capacity for healthy relationship. She doesn't take that response as evidence that she shouldn't have spoken her truth. She takes it as evidence about who she's dealing with. This discernment helps her make wise choices about who to invest in and who to distance from. Building this habit requires practice, and it often starts with lower stakes situations. If you're not used to speaking your truth, start with small things. Tell the waiter your order is wrong. Decline an invitation you don't want to accept. Express a different opinion in a casual conversation. These small exercises in honesty build the muscle for bigger conversations. They help you discover that the world doesn't end when you're direct, that people can handle your truth, and that you feel better when you're authentic. It also requires working on your emotional regulation so you can stay grounded during difficult conversations. This might mean breathing exercises, learning to notice when you're getting triggered, developing the ability to pause before responding, practicing speaking about sensitive topics when you're calm. The better you can manage your own emotional state, the more effectively you can communicate your truth with grace. The practice of speaking your truth with grace extends to all areas of life. At work, it means addressing issues with colleagues or supervisors directly rather than complaining to everyone except the person involved. It means advocating for yourself in negotiations, asking for what you need, and saying no to unreasonable demands. In friendships, it means addressing hurts rather than ghosting, expressing your needs in the friendship, and being honest when someone crosses a line. In family relationships, it means setting boundaries with difficult relatives, speaking up about unacceptable behavior, and being honest about your limits. This habit also involves being honest about positive feelings, not just difficult ones. The mature woman who speaks her truth doesn't just communicate problems. She also expresses appreciation, love, admiration, gratitude. She tells people when they've done something that means a lot to her. She compliments genuinely and specifically. She expresses her feelings openly rather than expecting people to just know. This full-spectrum honesty, both about difficulties and about positive experiences, creates rich, deep relationships. One beautiful aspect of this habit is how liberating it becomes. When you speak your truth consistently, you stop carrying the weight of things unsaid. You don't lie awake replaying conversations and wishing you'd said something different. You don't build up resentment from repeatedly swallowing your feelings. You don't create elaborate stories in your head about what people think or feel because you just ask them. This creates a clean, clear internal space that feels incredibly peaceful. The irresistible quality of this habit shows up as a kind of straightforwardness and reliability that people find refreshing. In a world full of indirect communication, hidden agendas, and people-pleasing, someone who simply says what they mean and means what they say stands out. You become someone people can trust and rely on. You become someone who creates clarity rather than confusion. You become someone safe to be authentic around because you're modeling that authenticity yourself. As you develop this habit, you'll notice that your relationships either deepen or end, and both outcomes are good. Relationships based on you suppressing yourself can't survive you speaking your truth, and that's a feature, not a bug. Those relationships weren't serving you anyway. The relationships that survive and thrive when you become more authentic are the ones worth investing in. They're the ones where you're truly seen and valued for who you actually are, not who you pretend to be. The mature woman who speaks her truth with grace becomes a person of integrity. Her external communication matches her internal experience. She's congruent, she's authentic, she's trustworthy. She can handle difficult conversations without falling apart or attacking. She creates space for real issues to be addressed and resolved. This skill set makes her invaluable in all her relationships and incredibly attractive to people who value honesty and depth. Habit number 6. She embraces aging with confidence. The sixth habit that makes a mature woman irresistible is perhaps the most countercultural in a society obsessed with youth. It's the ability to embrace aging with confidence, to see the years as accumulation rather than deterioration, to appreciate the wisdom, freedom, and perspective that come with age, rather than mourning the loss of youth. This isn't about giving up on caring for yourself or letting yourself go. It's about refusing to internalize the cultural narrative that says your value decreases with every birthday and instead claiming the power and beauty that exists in being fully, unapologetically your age. Let's be honest about the cultural context we're operating in. Women are bombarded with messages that youth equals value, that aging is something to fight, prevent, reverse, or hide at all costs. The beauty and fashion industries make billions selling the promise of looking younger. Plastic surgery is marketed as empowerment. Gray hair is something to cover. Wrinkles are problems to solve. The entire cultural apparatus tells women that aging is failure, that every year past 30 is a loss. that your worth is tied to your proximity to youthful appearance. The irresistible mature woman has rejected this narrative. She's recognized it as a profitable lie designed to keep women insecure, spending money and chasing an impossible goal. She understands that fighting against the natural process of aging is exhausting, expensive, and ultimately futile. More importantly, she's discovered that there are gifts in aging that youth simply cannot offer, and she's chosen to focus on those rather than what she's supposedly losing. This habit is irresistible because confidence is always attractive, and confidence in the face of cultural pressure to feel ashamed is especially powerful. When a woman walks into a room comfortable in her aging body, proud of her gray hair or her wrinkles that tell the story of decades of laughter and concern, secure in her worth despite not looking 25, she radiates a kind of self-assurance that stops people in their tracks. She's not performing for the male gaze. She's not competing in the Youth Olympics. She's simply being herself, and that authenticity is magnetic. Moreover, the woman who embraces aging demonstrates a psychological strength and independence from external validation that is incredibly attractive. She's not basing her worth on whether others find her conventionally attractive. She's not seeking constant reassurance that she still looks good for her age. She's not anxiously monitoring every new wrinkle or gray hair as evidence of her declining value. She's defined her own standards and she's comfortable in her own skin. This internal security is far more attractive than any amount of strategic anti-aging products. Think about the difference in energy between a woman who is fighting her age and a woman who is embracing it. The first woman is anxious, self-conscious, constantly comparing herself to younger women, worried about being perceived as old, spending enormous time and money and mental energy trying to look younger. She can't enjoy the present because she's mourning the past. She's focused on what she's losing rather than what she's gaining. The second woman who embraces her age is relaxed, comfortable, present. She's not wasting energy on futile battles. She's not obsessing over things she can't control. She's appreciating what she has now, the wisdom, the experience, the freedom, the clarity, the confidence, the lack of need for approval. She's focused on living fully rather than looking young. She's engaged with what matters rather than distracted by superficial concerns. This peace and presence is incredibly attractive. Let's talk about what it actually means to embrace aging with confidence. It starts with challenging and rejecting the ageist narratives you've internalized. When you notice yourself thinking that you're too old for something, ask yourself, who says? According to whom? When you catch yourself apologizing for your age or your appearance, ask yourself why. When you find yourself envying younger women, interrogate what you actually think they have that you don't. Most of the time, you'll discover that the beliefs driving these thoughts aren't even yours. They're absorbed from a culture that profits from your insecurity. It means developing a realistic and appreciative view of what aging actually brings. Yes, there are challenges. Bodies change. Energy levels might shift. Recovery takes longer. But there are also extraordinary gifts. Emotional regulation improves. You care less about others' opinions. You have clarity about what matters. You're free from the insecurities and uncertainties that plague youth. You have decades of experience to draw on. You've survived things that seemed impossible and learned you're stronger than you knew. These are substantial advantages that youth simply cannot offer. The woman who embraces aging also takes care of herself from a place of love rather than fear. She exercises because it feels good and keeps her strong, not because she's terrified of gaining weight. She eats well because she wants to feel energized and healthy, not because she's trying to maintain some arbitrary beauty standard. She gets enough sleep because she values how she feels when she's rested, not because she's trying to prevent wrinkles. The motivation shifts from external validation to internal well-being, and that Shift changes everything. She might choose to color her gray, or she might rock her silver. She might dress in styles that flatter her current body, or she might wear whatever makes her happy. She might use skincare, or she might embrace her wrinkles. The key is that she's making these choices for herself, based on what makes her feel good, not based on what she thinks she should do to be acceptable or attractive to others. There's no rule that says you have to stop caring about appearance, but the question is, are you caring from a place of self-expression and self-care, or from a place of fear and shame? This habit involves talking about aging differently. The irresistible woman doesn't constantly make self-deprecating comments about being old. She doesn't apologize for her age or fish for compliments about how good she looks for her age. She doesn't join in when others complain about aging or trash talk older women's appearances. She speaks about her age neutrally or positively, and she shuts down ageist comments when she encounters them. She might say things like, "I'm 65 and I've never felt more confident," or "I love my gray hair, I earned every one," or "These wrinkles are from 50 years of laughter and life." She doesn't say, "I'm 65 but I still work out," or "I'm trying to keep the gray away as long as possible," or "Don't look too closely at these wrinkles." The difference is subtle but profound. One communicates shame and apology. The other communicates pride and acceptance. The psychological mechanism here is powerful. When you embrace something rather than resist it, you free up enormous amounts of mental and emotional energy. The constant vigilance, the anxiety, the self-criticism, the comparison, all of that takes energy. When you let it go and simply accept where you are, that energy becomes available for things that actually matter. You can focus on your relationships, your work, your interests, your growth, your contributions. You're living your life instead of fighting reality. Moreover, embracing aging allows you to be fully present. You're not mentally time traveling, constantly thinking about how you used to look or wishing you were younger. You're here now in this body at this age, living this life. This presence is deeply attractive because present people are engaged, available, and alive in a way that people stuck in the past or anxious about the future simply aren't. The woman who embraces aging also becomes a powerful role model, especially for younger women who are terrified of getting older because they've been sold the narrative that aging equals obsolescence. When you show them that you can be vibrant, relevant, attractive, powerful, and happy in your 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond, you give them permission to imagine a different future for themselves. You prove that life doesn't end at 30 or 40 or 50. You demonstrate that there's joy and power and beauty at every age. This modeling is part of what makes you attractive to all ages. Younger women want to know you because you represent a future they can look forward to rather than fear. Your peers are drawn to you because you reflect back to them that they're not losing value with each passing year. Even men who might initially be socialized to value youth often find mature confidence incredibly attractive once they encounter it, especially men who are themselves mature enough to value substance over surface. Let's address the specific fears around aging that many women carry. Fear of becoming invisible is a big one. There's a narrative that older women disappear, that they're no longer seen or valued once they're past a certain age. But here's the truth. What actually happens is that you become invisible to people who only value women for their youth and sexual availability. And that's a feature, not a bug. You're not invisible to the people who matter, the people capable of seeing beyond surface. Appearance to recognize wisdom, character, capability, and depth. Another fear is becoming irrelevant. But relevance isn't tied to age. It's tied to engagement with the world. The mature woman who stays curious, who keeps learning, who remains engaged with current issues and evolving culture, who has interests and pursuits, who contributes her skills and wisdom, is extremely relevant. Irrelevance comes from disengaging and giving up, not from having birthdays. There's also fear around being attractive or sexually desirable. The culture tells you that sexual attractiveness is the domain of the young, but that's absurd. Sexual attraction is about far more than smooth skin and tight bodies. It's about confidence, self-knowledge, communication, passion, presence, all things that often improve with age. Many women report having the best sex of their lives after 50 because they've finally figured out what they want, they're comfortable asking for it, and they've released the inhibitions and insecurities that plagued their younger years. Building this habit requires actively countering the ageist messages you encounter daily. When you see an ad for anti-aging products, remind yourself that aging is not a disease that needs curing. When someone compliments you by saying you don't look your age, recognize the inherent insult in the assumption that looking your age would be bad. When media represents older women as invisible, pathetic, or only valuable as supportive characters in younger people's stories, actively seek out representations of powerful, interesting, complex older women. It requires surrounding yourself with people who value you for who you are, not how you look. If you're in a relationship where you feel pressure to maintain a youthful appearance, or where your aging is treated as a problem, that's a relationship problem, not an aging problem. Healthy partners appreciate the whole person you are and the whole journey you're on together. They're aging too, and they understand that's part of being alive. The practice also involves celebrating age milestones rather than hiding from them. The irresistible woman doesn't lie about her age or treat birthdays as shameful secrets. She celebrates them as achievements. Every year is a gift, a year of growth and experience and survival. She might throw herself a big party for her 60th birthday. She might share her age proudly in conversations. She might post birthday celebrations on social media without self-deprecating jokes. She claims her age as part of her identity rather than treating it as shameful information to conceal. One of the most powerful aspects of embracing aging is the freedom it brings. There's a particular kind of liberation that comes from no longer needing to perform youth or conventional attractiveness. You can wear what's comfortable. You can speak your mind. You can make unconventional choices. You can take up space. You can be unapologetically yourself because you're not trying to fit into someone else's narrow definition of what a woman should be. This freedom is intoxicating and attractive to witness. The mature woman who embraces aging understands that true beauty evolves with age. It's not about looking 25 forever. It's about the beauty of strength, wisdom, character, authenticity, and life fully lived. It's the beauty of a face that shows emotion, that's been expressive, that tells a story. It's the beauty of a body that's strong and capable regardless of how it looks. It's the beauty of presence, confidence, and self-possession. These forms of beauty are deeper and more lasting than the superficial attractiveness of youth. She also recognizes the privilege inherent in aging. Every birthday is a privilege denied to many. Getting to grow older means you survived. You made it through all the things that could have gone differently. You get to accumulate more experiences, more relationships, more wisdom, more impact. This perspective shifts aging from loss to gain, from decline to accumulation, from something to dread to something to celebrate. As you work on developing this habit, pay attention to your self-talk around aging. Do you constantly critique your changing appearance? Do you compare yourself unfavorably to your younger self or to younger women? Do you catastrophize about getting older? Do you treat aging as a problem to solve? These thought patterns reinforce insecurity and unhappiness. Challenge them. Replace them with appreciation for what your age represents: survival, growth, wisdom, freedom. The irresistible mature woman who embraces aging with confidence becomes a force of nature. She's unshakable because her worth isn't tied to fluctuating beauty standards or cultural approval. She's powerful because she's accumulated decades of experience and she knows how to use it. She's attractive because she's authentically herself, comfortable in her skin, present in her life. She's living proof that women don't expire, don't become irrelevant, don't lose value with age. Instead, they become more themselves, more powerful, more valuable with every passing year. Habit number 7. She practices strategic vulnerability. The 7th and final habit that makes a mature woman irresistible is the sophisticated skill of strategic vulnerability. This is the ability to be open and authentic about your struggles, emotions, and imperfections while maintaining appropriate boundaries and discretion. It's the balance between emotional availability and oversharing, between authenticity and privacy, between letting people in and protecting your inner world. It's vulnerability as a conscious choice rather than unconscious emotional dumping, and it's one of the most powerful tools for creating deep connection. Let's first distinguish what strategic vulnerability is not. It's not oversharing with anyone who will listen. It's not using your trauma as an icebreaker or making your pain your personality. It's not being an emotional mess with no capacity to regulate or contain your feelings. It's not manipulation through playing the victim or fishing for sympathy. It's not the kind of vulnerability that makes others uncomfortable or puts them in the position of having to take care of you emotionally. That's not strategic. That's just unprocessed emotion spilling out everywhere. Strategic vulnerability is intentional, boundaried, and appropriate to the context and relationship. It's selectively letting the right people see your real struggles and emotions in ways that deepen connection rather than create burden. It's sharing not from neediness but from a desire for authentic relationship. It's being honest about being human, having challenges, making mistakes, feeling uncertain or scared, while still maintaining your dignity and strength. This habit is irresistible because it creates the possibility of real intimacy. Human beings connect through shared vulnerability, through seeing each other's humanity, through knowing we're not alone in our struggles. When someone is willing to be authentically vulnerable with you, it's an invitation to drop your own mask and be real too. It creates space for depth and genuine connection that simply can't exist when everyone is performing perfection. The mature woman who has mastered strategic vulnerability understands that strength and vulnerability are not opposites, they're complementary. It actually takes tremendous strength to be vulnerable, to admit when you don't have all the answers, to share that you're scared or struggling, to ask for help when you need it. Weakness is pretending you're perfect, never admitting mistakes, always having to be the strongest person in the room, never letting anyone see your humanity. True strength includes the capacity to be appropriately vulnerable. Think about people you feel close to in your life. Chances are those are people who have shared something real with you, who have let you see beyond their public persona, who have trusted you with their authentic selves. Now think about people you've known for years but still feel distant from. Often those are people who maintain a perfect facade, who never share anything real, who keep all conversations at surface level. Strategic vulnerability is what bridges that gap between acquaintance and genuine connection. So what makes vulnerability strategic rather than just emotionally uncontrolled? First, it's selective about who you're vulnerable with. Not everyone has earned the right to see your inner world. Not everyone is trustworthy with your emotions. Not everyone has the capacity to hold space for your vulnerability. The mature woman shares deeply with people who have demonstrated that they can be trusted, who are safe, who reciprocate with their own appropriate vulnerability. She doesn't throw her pearls before swine, so to speak. This means she's observant about how people respond to vulnerability. Does this person gossip about others' private information? Do they use what you share against you? Do they minimize your feelings or make it about themselves? Or do they respond with empathy, hold your confidence, and reciprocate with their own authenticity? The answers to these questions guide who she's vulnerable with and to what degree. Second, strategic vulnerability is appropriately timed. There's a natural progression in relationships from surface to depth. You don't lead with your deepest wounds and biggest fears when you first meet someone. You share gradually, watching how the information is received, whether trust is being built, whether the relationship can hold increasingly deeper sharing. The mature woman understands this progression and doesn't rush it. She lets intimacy build naturally rather than forcing it through premature or inappropriate disclosure. Third, strategic vulnerability is about sharing your process, not just dumping your emotions. There's a difference between saying, "I'm struggling with anxiety and I'm working with my therapist to develop better coping tools," and calling someone every day to unload all your anxious thoughts without any sense of working on the issue. The first is sharing your human experience while also taking responsibility for it. The second is using someone else as an unpaid therapist and dumping without boundaries. The woman who practices strategic vulnerability shares her challenges but also shares how she's addressing them. She might say, "I'm going through a difficult time with my adult son and I'm learning a lot about boundaries," or "I made a mistake in that project and I'm working on how to prevent it in the future." She's not hiding her struggles or pretending to be perfect, but she's also not wallowing or expecting others to fix her problems. She's sharing while also demonstrating agency and resilience. Fourth, strategic vulnerability includes emotional regulation. Before sharing something vulnerable, she checks in with herself. Am I regulated enough to share this clearly, or am I so activated that I'll just be venting without purpose? If she's too emotionally flooded, she might say, "Something difficult happened and I need to process it a bit before I can talk about it. Can we connect tomorrow?" She gives herself time to move through the acute emotional response so that when she does share, it's from a more grounded place. This doesn't mean she never shows emotions. She can cry, express anger, show fear. But there's a difference between feeling emotions in someone's presence and dumping unprocessed emotional chaos on them. She can say, "This is really hard and I need to cry for a minute," which is sharing the moment, versus completely falling apart without any ability to communicate or regulate, which puts the other person in an impossible position. Fifth, strategic vulnerability is reciprocal and relational. It's part of a mutual exchange where both people are sharing and supporting each other. It's not one person always being the vulnerable one, while the other always plays the strong supporter. The mature woman notices if the vulnerability in a relationship is one-sided and addresses it. She might gently encourage a friend who never shares to open up. Or she might recognize that a relationship where she's always the one needing support is unbalanced and needs adjustment. Let's talk about why this habit is particularly important for mature women. As we age, we often become more self-sufficient and capable. We've developed skills and resilience. We can handle a lot on our own. This is wonderful, but it can also create isolation if we never let anyone see that we still struggle sometimes, that we don't have everything figured out, that we need support and connection. Strategic vulnerability prevents that isolation by keeping us connected to our own humanity and to others. It also models for younger generations that you don't have to have it all together to be worthy and valuable. The myth of the strong black woman, or the capable career woman, or the perfect mother, these archetypes that demand invulnerability from women, they're damaging. They create the illusion that if you're struggling, you're failing. The mature woman who strategically shares her vulnerabilities dismantles these myths and shows that real strength includes acknowledging your humanity. Moreover, in a culture that often makes older women invisible or treats them as if they should have transcended normal human emotions and needs, strategic vulnerability is an act of resistance. It says, I'm still here, I'm still feeling, I'm still growing and struggling and learning. I'm not a wise sage who's beyond human concerns. I'm a full human being with a rich inner life that includes challenges and uncertainties. This refusal to disappear or become two-dimensional is powerful. The practice of strategic vulnerability requires developing self-awareness about your emotional state and needs. You need to know when you're seeking genuine connection versus when you're seeking validation, sympathy, or someone to fix your problems. You need to recognize the difference between sharing vulnerably and performing victimhood. This requires honest self-examination and sometimes feedback from trusted others who can point out when your vulnerability is becoming a pattern of neediness. It also requires developing a robust self-care practice so that you're not relying on others to regulate your emotions for you. When you have tools for managing difficult emotions, processing trauma, and meeting your own needs, you can share vulnerably from a place of strength rather than desperation. You're inviting connection, not demanding rescue. This is the crucial difference. Building this habit means practicing with lower stakes vulnerabilities first. Maybe you share with a friend that you're nervous about an upcoming event, or you admit to a colleague that you made a mistake, or you tell your partner that their comment hurt your feelings. These smaller acts of vulnerability build the muscle and help you develop discernment about who is safe to be vulnerable with and how it feels to share authentically. As you practice, pay attention to how sharing affects you and the relationship. Does vulnerability deepen the bond or create distance? Does the other person reciprocate or withdraw? Do you feel better or worse after sharing? These observations guide you in refining your practice and choosing wisely about where to invest your vulnerability. The mature woman also knows that strategic vulnerability includes asking for help when needed. This is challenging for many women who pride themselves on independence and capability, but the ability to ask for support is a crucial life skill. It might look like asking a friend to accompany you to a difficult appointment, requesting help with a project that's overwhelming you, or simply saying, I'm going through a hard time and I could use some company. These requests create opportunities for others to show up for you and deepen the relationship through reciprocal care. She also practices receiving vulnerability from others with grace and without trying to fix everything. When someone shares something vulnerable with her, she doesn't immediately jump to solutions or minimize their feelings. She listens, validates, empathizes, and asks how she can support them. This creates safety that encourages others to continue being authentic with her. It also prevents the dynamic where she's comfortable being vulnerable, but inadvertently shuts down others' vulnerability through her responses. One beautiful aspect of this habit is how it humanizes you and makes you approachable. The woman who is always perfect, always has it together, always has the answers. She's intimidating and hard to relate to. The woman who acknowledges her imperfections, shares her struggles appropriately, and admits when she doesn't know something. She's someone you can imagine being friends with. She's someone you can trust with your own vulnerability because she's demonstrated hers. Strategic vulnerability also allows for deeper problem solving and support because people actually know what you're dealing with. If you always present a perfect front, people can't offer relevant help or support because they don't know what you need. When you share that you're struggling with something, you create the opportunity for others to offer resources, perspective, or assistance that could be genuinely helpful. As you develop this habit, you'll find that your relationships naturally sort themselves. People who can't handle appropriate vulnerability, who use what you share against you, or who want you to always be strong and never need anything, they'll filter out. What remains are relationships that can handle the full spectrum of human experience, where both joy and struggle can be shared, where both people can be real. These are the relationships worth having. The irresistible quality of strategic vulnerability comes from the authenticity and emotional intelligence it demonstrates. It shows you're self-aware enough to know your inner world and confident enough to share it selectively. It shows you value genuine connection over impression management. It shows you're human and you're okay with being human. It creates an energetic openness that invites others into deeper relationship while maintaining enough boundaries to feel safe. This habit also prevents the brittleness that can come from always having to be strong. When you can acknowledge struggles and share them appropriately, you don't have to carry everything alone. You can receive support, perspective, and care from others. This creates resilience through connection rather than through isolated strength. And ironically, being willing to be vulnerable makes you stronger because you have a support network and you're not exhausting yourself pretending to be invincible. The mature woman who practices strategic vulnerability becomes someone others trust and feel safe with. They know she won't judge their imperfections because she's acknowledged her own. They know she values authenticity over performance. They know she can handle the full range of human experience without falling apart or making it about herself. These qualities make her an exceptional friend, partner, colleague, and presence in others' lives. And there you have it, 7 powerful habits that make a mature woman absolutely irresistible. Let's quickly review them because each one deserves to be remembered and practiced. First, she owns her story without apology. Every experience, every mistake, every triumph, she claims it all as part of who she is without shame or excessive explanation. She's made peace with her past and carries it with ease. Second, she practices radical self-prioritization. She treats her needs, health, desires, and well-being as legitimate and important. She has boundaries and she maintains them because she knows she can't pour from an empty cup. Third, she cultivates genuine curiosity about life and others. She asks real questions, listens deeply, continues learning, and approaches the world with wonder rather than cynicism. This keeps her engaged, interesting, and deeply connected to others. Fourth, she maintains her own passions and pursuits. She has interests, goals, and activities that are entirely hers, independent of her relationships or roles. This keeps her identity strong and her life full. Fifth, she speaks her truth with grace. She communicates honestly and directly without being harsh or aggressive. She addresses difficult issues, sets clear boundaries, and says what needs to be said while maintaining respect and kindness. Sixth, she embraces aging with confidence. She rejects the cultural narrative that says her value decreases with age and instead claims the wisdom, freedom, and power that come with her years. She's comfortable in her aging body and proud of her journey. Seventh, she practices strategic vulnerability. She shares authentically and deeply with people who have earned that trust, creating genuine intimacy while maintaining appropriate boundaries and emotional regulation. These 7 habits, when practiced together, create a woman who is magnetic, powerful, authentic, and deeply attractive at any age. But here's the important thing to understand. These aren't traits you either have or don't have. They're habits, which means they can be developed, practiced, and strengthened over time. You can start today with whichever habit resonates most strongly with you or whichever one you most need to work on. Maybe you need to start owning your story without shame. Maybe you need to finally prioritize yourself after years of putting everyone else first. Maybe you need to rediscover what you're curious about or reconnect with passions you've let fall away. Maybe you need to get more comfortable speaking your truth, embracing your age, or being vulnerable in healthy ways. Wherever you start, just start. Pick one habit and begin practicing it consciously. Remember, becoming irresistible isn't about manipulation or attracting as many people as possible. It's about being so authentically yourself, so grounded in your worth, so engaged with your life that you naturally draw in people who appreciate and resonate with the real you. It's about creating a life that's rich and full and meaningful, whether or not anyone else notices or approves. These habits make you irresistible not just to others, but to yourself. They make you someone you respect, someone you enjoy being, someone you're proud to be. And that internal relationship, the one you have with yourself, is the foundation for everything else. When you genuinely like and respect yourself, when you're living according to your values and treating yourself well, that shows up as confidence, peace, and authenticity that others find compelling. If this video resonated with you, if you found value in these 7 habits, I want to ask you to do a few things. First, hit that like button. It seems like a small thing, but it genuinely helps more women discover this content and step into their power. Second, I want you to share this video with another woman who needs to hear this message. Maybe it's your best friend who's struggling with confidence, your sister who's going through a hard time, your mother who doesn't realize how amazing she is, or a colleague who could use some encouragement. Share this video with her and start a conversation about these habits. Third, I want to hear from you in the comments. Which of these 7 habits resonates most with you? Which one do you need to work on most? Which one do you feel you've already mastered? Tell me your story. Share your struggles and your victories. The comment section of this channel is a community of women supporting women, and your voice matters here. Fourth, if you haven't already, subscribe to the Heart Code and turn on notifications so you never miss our content. We create videos like this regularly, all focused on helping you build confidence, recognize your worth, create healthy relationships, and step into your power. This channel exists to serve you, to remind you of your value, to give you tools and perspectives that help you thrive. And finally, if you really want to support this channel and help us continue creating content that empowers women, consider supporting us with super thanks. Your contribution, no matter the size, helps us invest in better production, deeper research, and reaching more women with these important messages. Think of it as investing not just in this channel, but in a movement of women reclaiming their power and worth. Before we end, I want you to know something important. If you're watching this video, whether you're 45 or 65 or 75, whether you've been married for decades or you're newly single, whether you feel like you have your life together or you're still figuring things out, you are worthy exactly as you are right now. These 7 habits aren't about fixing what's broken in you. Nothing is broken. They're about fully expressing the amazing woman you already are. You are not too old. You are not past your prime. You have not missed your chance. Every day is an opportunity to step more fully into yourself, to practice these habits, to become more authentically you. The most irresistible thing about you isn't going to be your age, your appearance, your accomplishments, or your relationship status. It's going to be your willingness to be genuinely, courageously, unapologetically yourself. So start today. Pick one of these 7 habits. Think about how you can practice it this week. Maybe it's having one difficult conversation where you speak your truth. Maybe it's setting one boundary you've been avoiding. Maybe it's sharing one piece of your story you usually hide. Maybe it's signing up for that class you've been curious about. Maybe it's looking in the mirror and appreciating your aging face instead of criticizing it. Maybe it's sharing something vulnerable with a trusted friend. Whatever it is, take one small step toward embodying these habits, toward becoming the irresistible woman you already are underneath all the conditioning and fear and self-doubt. You deserve to live fully, love deeply, and be genuinely seen and appreciated for who you are. These 7 habits are your pathway to claiming that life. Thank you for being here. Thank you for investing this time in yourself. Thank you for being part of this community. I'll see you in the next video, where we'll continue this journey of building authentic confidence and creating the life you deserve. Until then, remember, you are enough, you are worthy, and you are absolutely irresistible, just as you are.